Hello, in this video tutorial you are going to learn how to install and configure FTP on IIS 8 in Windows Server 2012 by Sachin Sami, powered by tech.ptechrise.com. Okay, let's log on to Windows Server 2012. Let me type down my very secret password. Okay. As usual, the server manager has opened automatically. Now I have already installed the IIS and now I'm going to install the component of the IIS, which is FTP, for our tutorial. So let's click next. Just click next. Once again, the next button. From here, click on web server IIS, select FTP server and FTP extensibility, and now click on next again. Okay. Tick on the checkbox, restart the destination server automatically if required. Click on install. It takes 1 or 2 minutes to install, so just wait for a moment. Okay, yeah, as you can see, it is now installed. Let me click on close. So now we have installed the FTP server. Now let's click on tools and click on internet information service. Okay, let's minimize this, and before we start, we are going to create a user which we are going to use in our tutorial. So let's open computer management. In the computer management, go to local users and group users, right click on the user, click on new user and type down the username, that will be FTP user. Okay, and the password will be very secret. I'm not going to tell you. Okay. And I'm going to click on these two checkboxes, which is user cannot change the password and user password never expire. Let's click on create. Okay, the user has been created, as you can see here. Okay, so let's close this. Okay, and also close this one as we don't require it anymore. And let's open our IIS. Let me maximize this one. Okay, let's click on server node, sites. On the sites, if you see, there are multiple sites are already configured. Now I'm going to configure FTP. So right click and click on add an FTP site. Give a descriptive name. I'm going to give this FTP site a name that will be default FTP. Just wait for a moment. Okay, and I'm going to give a path to a folder, C drive, inetpub, and there is already a folder which I have already created, which is sites. Let me create a new folder. I will give this folder a name which will be default FTP. Okay, let's click OK. Click on next. From here, I'm going to select all unsigned IP address by default and also the port number, which is 21. Next, you can see enable virtual host name, which I'm not going to configure in this tutorial. You can check it out our next tutorial for virtual host name. So let's move forward. I have selected no SSL. Now let's click on next. Here I am going to select the authentication method. There are two types of authentication method, anonymous and basic. I'm going to select basic authentication. Let's click on the checkbox. Okay, and from here I'm going to select specific users who can access the FTP server. Now let's type the user which we have created earlier, that is FTP user, and let's give this user a permission which is read. Now click on finish. Select the default FTP website which we have just created. Okay, let's check it out. FTP authentication. Here you can see basic authentication is enabled and the anonymous authentication is disabled. Let's go back and click on FTP authorization. Here, as you can see, the permission which we have given is read to FTP user. Okay, so we have configured the FTP on the server. Now what we are going to do, we are going to the client system and access this FTP server using the FTP client application. So just hold on for a moment. I'm going to switch to the Windows 7 machine. But before that, let's see few more important things. Let's check it out, the IP address of this server. As you can see, the IP address of this server is 192.168.1.100. Let's close this. And let's also check it out, the firewall configuration of this server. Let me click on firewall. This is basically a Windows firewall. As you can see, the firewall is already enabled. Now let's click on advanced setting. On the advanced setting, inbound rules. In the inbound rules, click on the name, and if I go little bit down, you will see FTP server passive, and also FTP server secure. Now let's first check it out, the FTP server, which is on port 21. Let's check it out, the second one. Okay, this is FTP server passive. Basically, passive means it uses a random ports which are already assigned to it. Now let's check it out, the third one. It is FTP server secure. This uses 990. Okay, if you see here, FTP ports are disabled in the inbound rule of the firewall. So what I'm going to do is I will go to the client machine and try to connect to the server and see what error it is giving. Just hold on for a second. Let me connect to the client machine. Okay. First we are going to check the connectivity from the client to the server. To do that, we are going to open command prompt. On the accessories, click on command prompt. Here I am going to type the IP address, that is actually a ping command, ping ping, and type the IP address of the server. For our case, that is 192.168.1.100. As you can see, we are able to ping the server from the client machine. Okay, so now I'm going to check whether the port is open on the server firewall or not. To do so, I'm going to run the telnet command. To run the telnet command, you need to install a component of the Windows 7, which you will find over here, telnet client. I have already installed the telnet client. You just have to tick on the checkbox and click OK. It will automatically installed. So let's type telnet, telnet, net, okay, and the IP address of the server, that is 192.168.1.100, and the port number of the FTP server, that is 21. Now click enter. As you can see, it is showing me connecting to. Now if you see here, it is giving me an error. Could not open the connection to the host on the port 21. Connect failed. That means the port 21 is not open on the server. So let's go back to our server and let's open the port 21 and then check it out what happens. Okay, now we are on the server. Let's maximize the firewall window. Okay. Here on the firewall you can see the FTP inbound rule, which is working on port number 21. As you can see here. Now as you can see right now, this rule is disabled. To enable this, just click on enable. Once you have enabled the rule, that means you have opened the port 21 on this firewall, and the network traffic which is coming on port 21 can pass through the firewall. So let's go back to our client machine. Okay, so let's maximize the command prompt window. Here I'm going to type the same telnet command which we have earlier used. So let's type tel net space 192.168.1.100. that will be the IP address of the server, space 21. And as soon as I click enter, it gives me a banner. Basically it is showing me that the service is running on port 21 on the server which is Microsoft FTP service. So let's close this, and now we are going to open the client FTP software, which is, in my case, I'm using FileZilla, which is an open source freely available software which can be downloaded from the FileZilla website. I have already given the link. I have given the link for this software on the video description. Now let's click on File, Site Manager, New Site. Okay. So let's give a name to the FTP site. It can be anything. It is best to use the same name as your website so that you don't get confused later. So I'm going to type Peter Kreis. Okay. Now let's see host. Host name is basically a domain name of your website. You can use a domain name or you can use the IP address of the server. As you can see here, I'm using the IP address of the server. By default, most of the FTP client software uses port 21 automatically. So if the FTP server is using other port than port 21, you have to manually configure the port over here. Now, on the protocol, you do not have to change anything. And right now we are using plain FTP. So we will leave it as it is. Now the next is logon type. Here I am going to select ask for the password. On the user, let's type the user which we have created on the server, that was FTP user. So let me type it down, that is FTP user. Okay. And the password which will be asked when I will try to connect to the server. Now let's check it out, the advanced tab, there is nothing. Okay, on the transfer setting tab, I'm using the mode which is default. Basically default means it will going to use the passive FTP and not the active one. So let's try to connect and let's see what happens. It is asking me for the password. Remember my password for this session. I will uncheck this and I'm going to type my very secret password which I'm never going to tell you. Okay, let's click OK. And here you will see 227 entering passive mode, and here it says opening binary mode data connection. So just hold on for a moment. Basically the FTP client has established the connection to the server and now it is trying to opening the data channels. It says connection timeout, failed to retrieve directory listing. Okay, let's go back to our site manager. On the site manager, select the site and here I'm going to click on transfer setting. In the transfer setting, there is two types of mode, active mode and the passive mode. Let's select active mode. Let's click on connect. Okay, it is asking me the password. Let me type down the password. It is very secret, I'm never going to tell you. Let's click on connect, click on OK, and there, as you can see, directory listing successful. So now we have successfully connected to the FTP server using the active mode. The reason we couldn't able to connect to the FTP server using the passive mode is that the passive mode is blocked on the firewall of the server. Okay, so let's go back to the server and enable the passive FTP mode on the server firewall. So just hold on for a moment. Okay, so we are back on the server machine. Let's maximize the firewall window. Okay, right now this is FTP server selected. Below that you can see FTP server passive. Let me go a little bit forward. Here you can see the ports which this rule uses, that is 1024 to 65535. Basically in passive mode, the data channel automatically picks the random port from the server. So let's enable this rule. Also let me refresh the firewall. Just hold on for a moment. Okay. Now let's go back to our client machine. Okay, so let's open the FileZilla, which is a FTP client application. Just hold on for a moment. Okay, let's go to site manager. Here select the Peter Kreis and the transfer setting, transfer mode, and select default. Click connect. It will ask for the password. Remove the checkbox and type my very secret password. Okay, click OK, and as you can see, I am successfully able to connect to the FTP server using passive FTP mode. Now if you remember, we have given FTP user permission to read only. Now let's see what happens when I try to copy a file from local system to remote server. Let me copy this file and I'm going to drop this file over the remote server. Right now it is asking me a password of the remote server, so let me type down the password. Just hold on. Okay. Now if you see on the logs, it is giving me access denied, critical file transfer error. To solve this problem, I have to give the FTP user write permission. So let's go back to our server and let's give the user permission to write on this particular directory. So just hold on for a moment. Let me switch back. Okay, we are back on the server. Let me close down the firewall as we don't require it anymore. Okay. Now let's open the FTP folder which we have created earlier. inetpub, and the folder is site. In the site you will find default FTP. So let's create some files in this directory. Just hold on. Okay. So I have created 2 files in this directory. Now let's go to tools, Internet Information Service. Let me maximize this one. On the server node, let's select default FTP. On default FTP, let me click on FTP authorization rule. On the authorization rule, let's click on the user and let's click on the write checkbox. Click OK. So now we have given the write permission to FTP user. Now let's minimize this one and also minimize this, and let's go back to our client machine. Just hold on for a moment. Okay, so we are back on the Windows 7 machine. Now here you can see the FTP client has been disconnected, so let's connect it once again and check it out what happens. Let me type down my very secret password. Okay, once again okay. Now we have successfully logged in to the FTP server. As you can see, FTP listing successful. Now here it is showing 2 files which are on the server. As you can see above, it is given remote site, and here it is the file which we are going to copy onto the server. So let me drop it. It is asking me for the password. This time I'm not going to uncheck this box so that the password will be remembered. Let me type down the password and let's click OK. And still it is giving me an error. 550 access is denied, critical file transfer error. Now this error has occurred because the user does not have a permission on an actual folder which we have created for the use of FTP. So let's go back to the server. Now we are back on the server. Let me open the folder which we have earlier opened. This is the default FTP folder. Let's go one up to this folder. Just hold on. Let me click on sites, and here we are. Here you can see default FTP. Let's right click on this folder and click on properties security tab. From here click on edit button. Okay, click on add, advanced, find now, select the user. In our case it is FTP user. Okay, click on OK once again, and as you can see FTP user is added. Let me give this user a permission to write. Let's click on write and click on apply, then OK. I do not have to give any other permission to this user. Let me once again open this folder. There are 2 files. Okay, let's minimize this one and let's go back to our Windows 7 client machine. So just hold on for a moment. Okay, so we are back on the client machine. Okay, so let's click on the drop down arrow besides the site manager. Here you can see it is showing me Peter Kreis, which is my FTP account. Let's click on it and click on OK. I have successfully logged into the FTP server, as you can see. Now let's copy this file to the server. So I am dropping it onto the server and I have successfully done that, as you can see. File transfer successful. Transmitted 7 bytes in 1 second. If I see below here, it is showing me successful transfer 1. And if I click on it, it is going to show you the file which have been transferred. So you have seen FileZilla FTP client. Now let me show you one more software which is as good as FileZilla. Let me minimize this and let's open Coffee Cup Free FTP. Let's click on server, click on the green button which will add a new server. Let's type down our hostname, that is Peter Kreis. Let me give the IP address of the server, that is 192.168.1.100. Now let's type down the username and the password, which is FTP user and my very secret password. Okay, click on connect. Okay, as you can see, all the files on the server, it is showing over here. Now let's do one thing. Let me copy one file from my local system to the server. To do that, first I have to search for the file. Okay, here is it. Search in. Let me drop it on the server. And there, the file has been dropped on the server. Now we are going to disconnect the Coffee Cup Free FTP. Let's minimize this one. Let's go back to the server and check it out few more stuff. Okay, so let's check it out. First, the folder default FTP. As you can see here, there are two additional files. One is Sachin and the other one is new rich text document copy. We have uploaded these two files using FTP client software, in which one was FileZilla and the other one was Coffee Cup Free FTP. Now let's open Internet Information Service Manager. Okay. Now let's see how we can restrict the access for the server so that clients which are having a specific IP address will only able to access the FTP server. To do so, let's click on FTP address and domain restriction. Here you can see right now it is blank. So let's add a new rule. Click on add allow entry. Type down the IP address of the client. In our case, it will be 192.168.1.122, as you can see here. Now let's click on OK. Here is the IP address. As you can see, there is written allow. Right click on the IP address, edit feature setting. Okay. Here you can see access to the unspecified client is right now allowed. Let's click on the drop down and select deny. Access to the unspecified client is now denied. Click on OK. So if the IP address is not specified over here, the FTP client will be denied access to the FTP server. So let's go back to the client machine and let's check it out what happened when we try to access the server. Okay, so we are back on the client machine. Let's go to run and type cmd. Okay, click on OK. On the command prompt, let's type ipconfig. This will show me the IP address which is configured in my system. So the local IP address of my system is 192.168.133. Let's minimize this. And now let's open FTP client software FileZilla. Let's connect to the FTP server which we have earlier configured. Click on Peter Kreis. Click OK. And now you can see it is giving me error 503, user cannot log in, home directory inaccessible, critical error, could not connect to the server. This error occurred because we have configured IP address and domain restriction on the FTP server. Let's do one thing. Let's connect using the coffee cup free FTP, and let's see once again it is giving me the same error. So that means the IP and domain restriction configuration is properly working. Now let's change the IP address of this system to 192.168.1.122, which we have configured in IP address and domain restriction. So right now it is 133. Let's change it into 122. Okay. Click on OK. Close, close, and also close this. Now once again, let's type ipconfig. Okay. And now if you see, it is giving me the IP address 192.168.122. So once again, let's go back to the FTP client software. It is FileZilla. Click on the Peter Chris. It is asking me password because I have just changed the IP address of my client machine. Let me type down my very secret password and click OK. Once again, OK. And as you can see, directory listing successful. That means I have successfully logged on to the FTP server. Let's drop this file. It is showing me, do you want to overwrite the file? Click on OK. And there, we have successfully uploaded that file. Let me refresh this. Okay. Now let's close FileZilla. Okay, so thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope this was very informative for you. In our next tutorial, I am going to show you how to configure FTP virtual hostname. So don't forget to watch that one. If you like this video, do give the thumbs up. Subscribe to receive an email update whenever we post a new video. Share this video with your technical friends. If you are facing any technical problem or have any suggestions, post your comment here, or you can also catch me on Google Plus or Google Talk. This video tutorial is presented by Sachin Sami, powered by tech.peterchrist.com, and you are watching me and you are watching this on YouTube channel Peter Cry.